Today's episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an investment firm with over 20 years' experience, now expanding its offering to a wider pool of investors.
Greenman Open is a European long-term investment fund, ELTIF, that provides access to real estate investment through a regulated and professionally managed fund. Open is designed for long-term stability, and unlike many investment vehicles typically restricted to professional investors, they are available to a wide range of investors with lower minimum investment requirements, making them more accessible than ever. To learn more, visit greenmanopen.com.
Before making any investments, it's important to understand the risks. Investments can go up or down, and past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated ELTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. Hello and welcome to this, our latest edition of Path to Power. I'm Matt Cooper.
And I'm Ivan Yates.
Ivan, last Friday evening, last Saturday morning, my phone was abuzz with people texting me to say, "What is Ivan on?
Okay.
What about a misjudged call in your podcast? What a great week for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Everything going his way." Now, in fairness, you said all that before he did his Mafia hit job alongside Paulie Walnuts as he played Tony Soprano to Zelensky. But do you want to resile from what you said? Do you want to recant on what you said last week on your friend Donald Trump?
Well, first of all, I'm happy to double down on it. Insofar as
there's a surprise.
Insofar as I have rarely seen a week of such hysterical overreaction and misjudgment of the situation. So just on the specifics, we'll start with what kicked it all off. The Oval Office, J.D. Vance, and obviously a provocative situation. But this was not the intention. The signing of the mineral deal was the intention, and all the flags and all the dinner and all was set out for that. So first of all, I think everyone missed three basic points as regards Zelensky's contribution. And sorry, I'm not saying that J.D. Vance and Trump are without throwing fuel on the flames. But there were three things he said, because I listened to the whole thing subsequently, looking at the hysteria that emerged afterwards. One thing he said, which was incredible. He said, "Oh, well, look, this is Ukraine's problem today," and I'm paraphrasing him, "because you're an ocean away, you think you're inured from this. In other words, this is a latent threat to the US." Like, in the whole America First and MAGA is, don't give us lectures on our own personal security, on our own thing. The second thing he said, which was just unbelievable, he actually used the word, Ukrainians are alone. Alone was the word. And sorry, which part of 164 billion of US armaments military support, makes you alone? Like, my God, what sort of plan? And then to say, given that the one thing Trump wants is a deal. Now, whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, he wants a peace deal, and he wants that feather in his cap for a number of strategic reasons, to do with China, to do with energy prices, to do with trade and so on. And maybe they're good reasons and bad reasons. But the fact of the matter is, to say on the third part of it, that any peace prospect was very, very far away. Like, if you just want to go and poke a bear, kick him in the bollocks and absolutely outrage him, he did all of those things. And even his own ambassador, if you looked at the kind of body language of that, and subsequently, like, what actually happened since? He wrote a letter, a grovelling letter 3 days ago to retract nearly everything he said. And as last night, my understanding is agreement has been reached that Ukrainian officials will attend some of the talks in Saudi or wherever it is with Russia. So, I mean, they've actually capitulated on all the issues. But and then when I read acres of coverage of what Micheál should say about...
We'll get to that.
Okay, we'll get to that. So how do you react to that? That Zelensky was not without blame is my point.
Am I going to call you Ivanov or Yatesky for the rest of this podcast?
That's all
for
right.
your rehashing of Russian propaganda talking points.
Okay.
I'm listening to you, and you just imagine. You know where he was alone? It's Ukrainians who were alone in getting killed. I think that's what he meant. Not that they weren't getting support, that they weren't getting money and armaments from the rest of the world, but it's Ukrainian people alone who are getting killed, whereas the Russians are bringing in North Koreans and all the rest of it to back them up. There's a few things in relation to this, so just let me run through a few of them. Trump has turned Oval Office photo calls into a reality TV set. What used to happen is you would have the photographs taken of leaders visiting Trump. You would get a couple of softball questions from the media, and then you would have the discussions held in private. Trump decided to turn this into a TV reality show, public. And given Zelensky, English is not his first language. There were plenty of setups, such as the guy masquerading as a journalist who started berating Zelensky for what he had worn, ignorant of the fact that Zelensky has said he will not wear a suit during the time while the country is defending itself from the Russian aggression. Ignorant as well of the fact that Elon Musk had been inside in the Oval Office holding court in a T-shirt and jacket with his 4-year-old son on his shoulders only a couple of weeks earlier. It was all a whole series of deliberate stitch-ups. And J.D. Vance even, this thing... Zelensky has thanked America for its support countless times. He would have seen it himself, Vance, when he was in the Senate, when he would have attended, or in the House of Representatives and Senate, when he would have attended joint sessions of Congress in which Zelensky went stand. This was just thuggery set up by Polly Walnuts to Tony Soprano. And it was ugly and it was unnecessary. And what else was Zelensky supposed to do? This is a man who has suffered a brutal invasion, has seen so many of his fellow country people killed, others who have fled to try and escape the tyranny of this invader. So I would be very sympathetic to Zelensky, and I think he was quite measured in his reaction. And this idea that, he's to blame for not going kowtowing. And I think another thing in relation to Trump, and it needs to be brought into, he keeps going on about Ukraine's responsibility for ending the war. When do we ever hear Trump denouncing Putin and what the Russians are doing? Even this morning as I was coming in here, I was listening to the reports on the latest massive offensive by Russia against the gas networks in Ukraine. And during the week, there have been many more civilians killed. Where do you ever hear of Trump telling Putin, you have to stop the killing? This is victim blaming, victim shaming, and it is disgusting to see a democracy like the United States of America turn into this autocratic state. And it gives us grave concern as to where it's going to be in the world in the future. And also, in some respects, it doesn't make sense. When you think of it, Russia is not an economic superpower. It may have a whole load of military weapons and the rest of it, but the Russian economy is smaller than the Italian economy. And this goes back to something I was saying last week, and I would be delighted to see if the European Union puts the squeeze on in future. All of the assets, the Russian assets that are frozen, seize the lot. Take it. I know there might be issues in relation to the financial system in Europe, which I haven't seen fully explained as to what those issues might be. But take every single dollar or euro of Russian money and use it for the Ukrainians in the future, and make sure that the Ukrainians continue to defend themselves rather than being bounced by Trump into a surrender to the Russians.
Well, it's that type of righteous indignation that I've been listening to wall, right across the media mainstream consensus. And I'm just wondering, okay, I hope it all makes you feel better, because what's it going to achieve? It's actually going to achieve nothing. It's not going to bring us peace. It's not going to bring us negotiations. Look, the fact of the matter is, ultimately, there is going to be one outcome here, that the foot on the neck of Putin, which is sanctions, which is causing 21% inflation, and the fact that their economy has become a military economy, is ultimately unsustainable. So the situation is that if we're going to stop Ukrainians turning into body bags, we have to try and broker a peace. And I think Mario Rubio made a valid point. If the Marco Rubio, if the Americans don't try and broker a peace, name someone else in the whole world who will. That's a question to you. So take all that and
but the Americans are not trying to broker peace. They're trying to broker a surrender by Ukraine.
So then there is no peace. Then there is. Follow the logic of that. Okay, follow the logic of that. There's no point in dialogue with Russia because anything like that involves a surrender. So what you're actually saying is this war will go on in perpetuity.
No, where's the American pressure on Russia to stop? This war would stop if the Russians withdrew and stopped bombing Ukraine.
Right. So how is that going to happen? Just get me the rationale,
are you telling me
the pathway for that.
America is putting all of the pressure on Ukraine. Are you telling me that America doesn't have the power to put that type of pressure on Russia?
No. What he was saying to him when he meant was, you're not holding any cards. Ukraine are actually on their knees. And because the West and Europe have been so supportive of him, he is in a false reality. And the false reality is, if America pulls the plug, Ukraine are going to lose more ground, right? Because this brings us into the wider question of the particular Starmer initiative and the whole question of Europe's role. You actually say, okay, let's just say Trump and America are good to their word and don't support. Withdraw the intelligence, withdraw this. Where does that leave the Ukrainian people in the real world? Where it leaves them is they're going to lose more ground. They could actually lose their whole state. Because Europe, first of all, you actually rightly said that one of the points he made was the body bags. No one other Ukrainians are in the body bag situation. There is no desire. And within the EU, leaving aside what Starmer did a solo run that he would send forces there, there's no one, even the French said they wouldn't send forces. So the fact of the matter is, nobody in Europe is actually going to defend Ukraine. And some of the stuff they came up with, we'll just take the 800 billion. Whose arse did they pluck that out of? The total budget, 2021 to 2027 for Europe is 2 trillion, of which the Common Agriculture Project is this over a period of 2021 to 2027. And this is all set down and negotiated tediously. See, the CAP would be the biggest of that, 365 billion. And so the Green Deal alone was set to cost 500 billion, not a mention of that. Where is this 800 billion going to come from? The actual credibility of Europe in terms of, talking a great game on defence, they actually have no coherence. The Germans are not necessarily committed. The Spanish and the Italians all say, well, now look, don't sign us up for body bags. So what I'm trying to say is this. In the real world, Europe is all talk, it's indecision, and it's actually massively losing credibility, having these big summit set pieces, 800 billion. Where's any budget to provide this money?
Well, go back to real world, and if Trump is so interested in peace and in stopping the killing, you know what the implications of withdrawing American intelligence support to Ukraine would be? This means that American satellite images can tell when a missile is sent from Russia, where it's heading from, and it gives the Ukrainians the opportunity to scramble defences against the missiles and get people out of the way. If that is removed by Trump, that then means many, many more Ukrainian civilians will die. Because what is happening at present is Trump's actions are encouraging Putin to increase his bombardment of Ukraine. And also, there's also a degree of naivety in thinking that if Putin gets a so-called peace deal or a surrender deal, that he'll be satisfied with that. And it's very easy for us on an island off the coast of Europe to be sanguine about all of this. But all of our fellow EU members who are in Central Europe and in Eastern Europe are terrified, with good reason, because of the lessons of history and because of the continuing Russian attitudes about the potential that they will be next. And you can criticise the European Union legitimately for its failure to protect itself and to budget for itself, to have depended on the United States continuing to be this generous benefactor towards European security, although there are good reasons for the United States for that status quo to remain. But I think Europe has had such a wake-up call that when it comes to defence, and we might get to it later when it comes to economic issues, that I think a change is coming. It'll be very difficult to implement. It'll be difficult to implement because it's very difficult to get over 20 different nationalities to actually agree on a common policy in relation to major issues like this. And
it's dysfunctional. That's my point. Now, can I just say, just to put it in the global context, and I thought this summed it up, right? How can it be that 450 million Europeans expect 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who are being held in check by 40 million Ukrainians? And if
that's
you think
a Ukrainian joke at the moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Circulating on social media.
So the point I'm trying to make is there is a hidden truth in that yes, of course, what the row in the Oval Office and all the pyrotechnics and all of the optics, what it basically said is that 340 million Americans don't feel a deep obligation to defend the continent of Europe. That's the bottom line of this. And that is a sea change. And you know what? This could be just the first installment of it. That, in other words, there could be a trend over the next 10 years that basically US does not see it as its responsibility to defend Europe as they see it. They're probably more concerned about China, and they're actually probably more concerned at ensuring that what has emerged since the Ukraine invasion, China and Russia getting closer and closer together, that is an existential threat to American security.
If you might be exaggerating the effect that Russia can actually have on things, because as I said to you, this is an economy which is in great decline, which is spending something like 40% of its budget on defence, which is not necessarily a sustainable position. And I don't think you can even look a decade out, unless you think the MAGA movement is going to take control of American politics for the next decade or not. There's already significant signs that many Americans know that the scales are falling from their eyes when they see that it's not just rhetoric when it comes to Trump, that his agenda in full flow is counterproductive to their interests. And he's also all over the place. I mean, if you look at...
No, he is.
In relation
he is a mega disruptor. And that is actually, when you stand back and look at what he's doing, he is deliberately trying to be such a disruptor that people don't know how to react.
Well, that comes a little bit from the sort of the Elon Musk school and various of these tech giants who believe, they have had this theory for quite a while, that you have to break things entirely to rebuild them, that rather than changing carefully what you inherit, you actually just destroy it and you start again. And that just doesn't necessarily work. And it's interesting to see as well that even the US Supreme Court, that everyone thought was stacked in favour of the Trump agenda, is pushing back on certain things, such as, for example, US aid. They actually agreed this week that a massive amount of it had to be paid, that the commitments actually had to be honoured. And, and Musk does not have the requisite powers to go and make the change.
There's so many issues. So we're talking about Ukraine, and we can go into tariffs. We can go into budgetary policy, which is tax.
The point I'm making is that, despite the fact that at the moment an awful lot of people in America are afraid to put their head above the parapet in case the MAGA lot take it off, I think beneath the surface there's going to be an awful lot of intelligent people are just waiting for their opportunities to cut. And I think they will end up finding a lot of support.
So I actually totally disagree with Trump on the tariff question, which we'll come on to. But really, part of this hysteria has led into the coincidental situation. So you had Macron, you had Starmer, you had Zelensky, and next up is Micheál, right? And I even read one headline today, people who've never been involved in diplomacy, journalists who know nothing about high-level politics, 35 tips for Micheál. Like, there's only one thing that Micheál needs to do. And that is, he's never met this guy before. And this is, like, you could be meeting Gaddafi or you could be meeting any tyrant or whatever. You try and develop a personal rapport so that you actually go out of that room. Is it okay if I give you a ring? He'll take his call. That's as much as the expectations should be. And all this nonsense that he's going to lecture the US on Gaza, the Occupied Territories Bill, in terms of Ukraine. Like, this is all Zelensky territory of shooting yourself in the foot. Like, and I thought it was a great step. I don't know if you saw the clip. So one of the executive orders he signed, there was a march is designated as Irish America Heritage Month. And he was, he does his signing thing, and he said, and the lady who was handing him the particular folder said, I'm Irish myself. And he said, I love the Irish. And you know what? They voted for me because he got the white vote predominantly, which are Irish. So the point is this. That, to me, is a huge opening of that is the message that Micheál should be playing on. First of all...
Ivan, that's so naive. Do you know Joe Biden did exactly the same order this time last year?
Okay. No,
this is not
No, it's his reaction to the order is the point I was making. No, sorry. The idea that he would be anti-Irish, and sorry, there are very significant trade issues, which we will come to. But the point is this. A lot of the advice on how the Irish Prime Minister should lecture the US President on world affairs is so arrant, even abhorrent nonsense, because it's counterproductive. It won't have any impact on your MAGA America First nationalism, whereas what we need to do is safeguard our vital interests in relation to trade.
Okay, I have a lengthy response that I want to give to you on that, and we will do it when we come back after this break.
This episode of Path to Power is brought to you by Greenman, an Irish investment management firm. Greenman Open focuses on investing in grocery-anchored retail real estate, designed to generate stable, long-term income. The fund is managed in Ireland.
Learn more at greenmanopen.com. Before making any investment, it's important to understand the risks. Investments can go up or down. A past performance is not a reliable guide to future results. Greenman Open is a regulated ELTIF, but like all investments, it carries risks. You should always seek advice from a financial professional before investing. Welcome back to Path to Power. Okay, before the break, Ivan went into a lengthy diatribe about what Micheál Martin should and shouldn't do when he gets to the White House next Wednesday. Okay, I'll agree with some parts of that. I don't think he should be bringing up Gaza and also Ukraine. Now, funnily enough, the opposition in the Dáil seems far more interested in Gaza than it is in Ukraine, which I think...
And sorry, have you heard Sinn Féin say one bad word about Russia? Have you heard the left say one bad word about Russia?
When you push them, you will say they condemn what's happening in Ukraine and the rest of it when you push them. But, recently when Mary Lou MacDonald and Michelle O'Neill announced they wouldn't be going to Washington, the entire video statements they put out and press releases focused entirely in Gaza and did not mention Ukraine, as I said to you. So let me have a few minutes on this now, Ivan, please. You talk about diplomacy. I agree that basically what you try and do is you try and establish good relations. You want Micheál Martin making Donald Trump feel like he likes him, and there's a certain amount of ass kissing that has to be done, and you sort of have to swallow your pride to a certain extent so that you don't tip over into complete obsequience. But anyway, leaving that aside, as I said earlier, these events are different. This Micheál Martin event is going to be different to anything that Enda Kenny had with Donald Trump or Leo Varadkar did, because Trump is emboldened more in his second term of office. He's behaving differently to the way that he did in his first term of office. Also, as I said earlier, he is now turning these photo calls into opportunities for live reality TV shows. Now, he may not be interested in doing that with Micheál Martin. He might think Ireland is not worth it, that we're just too small. And hopefully that's what he will. Hopefully it'll just literally be handing over the bowl of the bowl of shamrock, and everyone will be actually quite happy, and everyone will go away, and we'll have dodged a bullet and we'll be relieved. But there are certain things that I'm concerned are going to come up based on things that Trump has said previously, and also based on things people in his orbit have said. So just bear with me on this. There's two major issues that are a problem. One is the Apple tax money. Trump has brought this up himself on a number of occasions. So I'll get back to this later. I think what Micheál Martin, if he's going to be really clever, if he gets drawn into things, he has got to have a list of things that he is going to tell Trump we are doing with that Apple tax money. Practical things such as protecting our undersea cables, investing extensively in cybersecurity, defensive measures which have nothing to do with us sacrificing our military neutrality and going to war. But he's got to have things ready. Just like, and this is going to be something that'll be very sore for those people who believe in the environmental agenda, but he is going to have to make concessions, and it's already been started by a government decision this week in relation to LNG. So that's one thing. But the second thing where we are vulnerable is in relation to Israel, right? And the Israeli lobby, Israel has lobbied extensively in the United States, not just amongst politicians, but amongst corporate America, to say that Ireland is anti-Israel and by extension anti-Semitic. Which I don't believe is true that we're anti-Semitic, but the majority of people aren't. There might be small pockets of Irish people who are, but I don't think Ireland as a country could be described as that. But there are two things that we have done. One is that we have officially recognised Palestine, correct thing to do. Secondly, we took the International Court of Justice, we enjoined with the South Africans in relation to alleged genocide in Gaza. That has caused fury with the Israelis and with the Israeli lobby, and that's likely to come up. And then, of course, we have the Occupied Territories Bill, which the government is in the process of diluting and delaying for tactical reasons, I think, and for good tactical reasons in relation to that. You have people like Howard Lutnick, who owns Cantor Fitzgerald, which also has an Irish business. And interestingly, and the timing of this may be significant into why Lutnick has been talking a lot about Ireland in recent months. He's been talking for two reasons. One, because he is Jewish and is very, very, very strongly supportive of Israel no matter what. Secondly, he's the type of guy who I imagine is very, very sore at the fact that Cantor Fitzgerald has been fined over €450,000 by the Central Bank of Ireland for failing to report suspicious trading. Billionaires like Lutnick don't like losing money to regulation like that. I suspect he must be aware of that. If we have somebody like Lutnick in Trump's ear going, these Irish guys are against our friends in Israel, you need to put them in their box, I think that is where Micheál Martin may be vulnerable, and he needs to be very much prepared for a clever diplomatic answer in relation to that in the White House next Wednesday.
So where I'm coming from is, so what is Ireland's vital national interest? So in all of the brouhaha the last week, I'm minded by Tom Savage's advice to Albert Reynolds. When you're hit with an existential crisis, your first reaction is not to run around like a headless chicken, condemning everything. You do nothing. You just assess the situation, you calm down and you reflect on where to go. So what are Ireland's vital national interests? So the first vital national interest that is jeopardised by America First and by Trump administration, and it's a real existential threat, is that we have our largest exports, 54 billion to the States, of which 36 billion are pharma, which are directly in the line of fire for a 25% tariff from the 2nd of April if things... And look, the thing could not be more uncertain.
That'll probably change given what we've seen with Mexico.
Absolutely. No, I'm sorry.
This flip-flopping by Trump actually, ironically, is undermining Wall Street confidence in him and business confidence in him. That's another issue.
So I'm doing a big international conference on Tuesday in relation to fund managers in terms of financial advisory, what to make of Trump tariffs and taxes. And in preparation for that, so one of the vital interests is that nothing happens next week that would force the NTMA to pay a higher rate on Irish bonds, right? In other words, we really do, there are consequences for getting this wrong, okay? So we have this threat to our trade from tariffs. The second threat we have is on the tax front, that obviously the 28 billion that we get in corporation tax is absolutely fundamental to our health service, our education services, and to public services generally, and the retention of that. Now, on the positive side, what I'm picking up is, first of all, that it is so uncertain. He is such a kind of scattergun of one day, one thing, and there's the pausing and the suspension of the Canadian, Mexican and Chinese tariffs gives hope that this is all bluster and may not happen. The second thing is that if you drill into the detail, take the transfer of intellectual property from here, so it moved from Bermuda to here. And so basically we have become the sweet spot for all this tax money that is coming here. If they were to relocate it, there is actually an exit tax of 33%. Secondly, in terms of pharma, there's quite a lot of workforce, staff shortages, and in terms of Irish things that cannot be replicated in America. Obviously then you have the situation, you have the midterm elections in 2 years, and that there may well be an unreality about some of these, and some of them have sales into Europe and in the EMEA area. So it is not a cliff edge, is my central point here. And we shouldn't talk ourselves into a crisis on that. And so therefore, to pause this, obviously a bigger concern is, and there's a thing called Section 891, it's a technical thing, but him withdrawing from the OECD BEPS global tax arrangement is actually one of the biggest threats. But one of the things I wouldn't do, which Harris and others have been saying, is, oh, by the way, Ireland has huge FDI in America.
Oh, that is so pathetic.
It is so pathetic, because a lot of that, if you look at Allergan, if you look at Medentech, these are US companies who have set up subsidiaries in Ireland, and they're actually investing back in the US as a way of repatriating the cash. And that argument does not hold water. In terms of the Kerry CARH's indigenous business, we are nowhere near the 6th or 7th in terms of FDI investment in the US.
Well, actually, there's a separate point in relation to that which I want to develop, and I talk about Simon Harris. But if you take the Irish companies who are major in the United States, who have been playing CRH and Smurfit, Kingspan, Kerry Group, Glanbia, Flutter, Paddy Power.
Yeah.
Just taking 6 major examples there.
And Ryanair's Boeing planes purchase.
Well, that's it. Well, yeah, and I was just going to get to that, and that's a separate thing because they're not boots on the ground, as in running businesses over there. But actually, what's the point of bringing them up? Because is Michael O'Leary going to withdraw his order with Boeing in protest at tariffs? No, he's not. Michael O'Leary has a reason why he takes Boeing. He wants the one aircraft for his entire fleet for maintenance and cost reasons. He has looked occasionally at moving to Airbus. He's not going to move to Airbus. He's going to stay with Boeing. He's sort of stuck with Boeing. They have this ritual dance about how much he actually pays for the aircraft when he gets them. But the reality is, Ryanair are not withdrawing from their deal with Boeing. That's one thing. Is CRH or Smurfit or any of those companies going to withdraw their assets from the United States? No, they're not. So we have no cards to play with. So I have no idea.
As well as fictional figures.
Yeah.
So there are American companies where it's not an FDI, they're actually repatriating money.
It's not a strong argument.
Yeah.
It's not a card to be playing at all, and it's rather baffling. And so there's 2 things that come out. One, actually, I think that if there is a wake-up call for Europe in relation to defence, there's also a wake-up call, I think, in relation to our economy in this side of the Atlantic. And the lack of dynamism in capital formation, for example. So just bear with me a second. Those 6 Irish companies that I just mentioned, CRH was formed by a merger back in the early 1970s and has grown into Ireland's biggest company, right? Enormous international conglomerate all around the globe, not just in the United States. Smurfit also big into America in the 1980s. The other companies all joined the stock market in the 1990s here in Ireland. They gathered capital, they developed their businesses. There's no one on that list who's done it in the last 25 years. Ireland has become a desert for the formation of new major companies. There are some that have got private equity support. There are some that have sold out and the rest of it. But we have become far too dependent on foreign multinational companies to create wealth in this country.
It's even worse. Ones that have been successful, like Stripe, the Collison brothers, have done it in the States. And in other words, it's not the lack of entrepreneurs, but we have spectacularly, beyond CRH, Flutter and the ones you spoke of, and the Irish Stock Exchange is reflecting this, we have no ability to scale.
No, exactly. And sorry, this is the point I was just trying to make. And I was going to get to the Collisons and Stripe. And people say, well, you have to go to Silicon Valley because you have to get the money. You don't actually. I mean, if you think of it, it was 50 years ago this year that GPA was formed in Shannon. Whoever would have thought that Ireland would become the hub globally for aviation leasing? And there was that ambition that was shown by an entrepreneur. And a friend of mine was suggesting to me in recent days, could it be that too many of the people that we are now training who come through our business schools and all the rest of it are happy to join the Googles and the Microsofts and the Apples when they come to Ireland because they are safe jobs to go into, very, very well paid and shares and the rest of it. Where is the dynamism coming from the new generation of business leaders? And I know there are people, and I can give examples of some things, have set up data centres and have set up other businesses and they've sold out. And there's some people have become extraordinarily wealthy in the last couple of decades, quietly away from the stock market. But apart from sectors like that, where is the new Irish business and why is our stock exchange floundering when we have more wealth in the country than we've ever had? Why isn't that money been invested in new Irish businesses and European businesses? And that's something that we've got to do for ourselves rather than leaving ourselves hanging out on these American multinationals and their tax arrangements which provide us for a windfall instead of actually providing for ourselves.
Well, there was actually, and we can discuss it in the subscription panel in more, episode in more detail, a launch of a 5-year Enterprise Ireland strategy. And
which I thought was fairly unambitious.
Okay. Well, we'll
get to that.
We'll come back to that.
But
So
can I talk about Simon Harris? No. Before you summarise, I want to talk about Simon Harris this week. Simon Harris had a phone call with Marco Rubio, the US Secretary of State, on Tuesday. And on Wednesday, Harris issued a brief statement as to what they spoke about. And then Rubio followed it up with a statement which added in details about a discussion on the trade imbalance as he perceives it. It also spoke about space exploration sector. What the hell is that about? How can Ireland actually offer to space exploration? We're not in a geographic location where we can be sending rockets up. But anyway, that's another issue. But I thought, Jesus, Simon Harris, there really are times when you wonder, can he resist the temptation to say something? Because, okay, he was probably getting questions as to why is Marco Rubio giving details of this trade imbalance that the Americans get so worked up on, which is in goods, not in services. Important point that Micheál Martin will have to make. But anyway, leaving that aside, why did Simon Harris bother to respond and basically trying to slap down Marco Rubio and say this didn't happen, this wasn't discussed? That was a statement Rubio was putting out for local political reasons.
In a lot of context,
let it go. Just ignore it. Simon Harris, there are times when, I know it's all very carefully media monitored and he talks to particular journalists that he likes and he goes on various interviews where he thinks he'll be able to put it. But there are certain times when he would be better off saying nothing. Yeah. And I know that I was contacted yesterday by a number of people in business and a number of people in politics who were actually furious with him. And I was reflected as well, I think, on the front page of the Irish Daily Mail on Friday. Fianna Fáil people are saying, shut up.
Yeah, no, and the situation is, first of all, in the TDS, people can't tolerate Vance, and you've spoken about different individuals. Rubio is seen as one of the more diplomatic of the Trump people, whether that's true or not, in terms of he is the softer voice in relation to that. Any public spat with Rubio in advance of the White House meeting last week is just absolutely shooting yourself in the foot. So my summary of and I don't think Micheál needs much advice, is one, expectations of this meeting should be lowered to the point, please don't poke the bear. Two, try and develop a rapport so that you could ring him on a Sunday morning if you needed to in 6 months' time, and just have some personal connection. You've never met him before. I'd build on the thing, you do get the Irish vote because you do get the white vote, and while everyone associates the Biden era as being so pro-Irish and so on, and even the son of the ambassador campaigning for the Democrats is all problematic in the current thing. But what I would pitch to Trump and to his regime is this. Why is it there's this trade imbalance? It is because over the last 40 years, American companies have found the most profitable location in the continent of Europe, in the EU, has been Ireland. We speak the same language, we understand the enterprise culture, and actually we are a victim of our mutual corporate success. We want to build on this. We hear you on LNG. We hear you about how we could buy energy for you. We'll hear you about a lot of ways that we can cooperate together. But let's not put in lights something that has been a tremendous success story.
Would you abase yourself to Trump? Do you think there's...
Politics is pragmatism. Sorry, you'll die in the ditch in your principles, Matt. I'm sorry. That is the difference between journalism and politics.
Have you been listening to me, what I've been saying about what Micheál Martin should do and shouldn't do? You're jumping to conclusions not based on the evidence of what I've been saying for the last 40 minutes.
There was a couple of other things happened this week.
What do you make about this whole row about the triple lock and neutrality? I mean, how do you see that? There's an argument been put forward by a number of people, the likes of Senator Tom Clonan, hundreds of academics who signed a letter. And there seems to be this belief that if we abandon the triple lock, that means that automatically we're going to be sending soldiers off to war. I'm just looking at this and I'm just going, is that not just a massive jump? That it strikes me that there's a strong argument been made by the government that the third leg of this triple lock in relation to the deployment of peacekeeping forces, that it does need to go because it's dependent on a resolution of the UN Security Council, and the United Nations at the moment is in rag order, and the Security Council has been blocked from resolutions by Russia and China and God knows as well the United States. Surely it's a matter of national sovereignty that we make our own decisions for ourselves rather than leaving them.
And in fairness, we've discussed that a number of times. Like anyone who spends half an hour reading the triple lock and the veto it gives to the European Security Council, which in turn gives a veto to the permanent members of it, realises that this is a nonsense. But this is only about peacekeeping. The triple lock is only about peacekeeping. Let's talk about the real elephant in the room, which is our neutrality, right? And let's just have a wake-up call to everyone in the country. Article 42.7 of the EU Constitution says as follows. If a member state, so that's any one of the 27, right? And includes us and includes Poland and anyone else. If a member state, and this is in the Constitution and has been the case for some considerable time, if a member state is a victim of armed aggression on its territory, the other member states shall have towards it an obligation of aid and assistance by all the means in their power, unquote. So the fact is this, we are not neutral.
Okay, no, hang on. I'm actually going to take you up in relation to that.
On the EU Constitution.
No, there are 4 member states in the EU now who are militarily neutral. So if you take the last bit of that statement, by all means available to them, those 4 countries can say we can deploy non-lethal aid, we can take refugees, we can support in all various ways, but that does not necessarily mean going to war. I don't think you will ever reach a situation where you will persuade the Irish people by way of constitutional referendum to drop military neutrality. So I think we've almost got to forget that. Hold on. But I do think we actually have to make an enormous additional investment in non-military issues, such as the things I mentioned earlier, such as becoming a cybersecurity hub. And here's maybe something else that could be offered to Trump, is that we offer almost like public-private partnership with American tech firms to become involved with us in making Ireland the hub for cybersecurity in this part of the world. We have got to find other ways to protect ourselves rather than depending on the quiet, on the British and on NATO and all the rest of it. Look, we're never going to be in a position where we would have enough armaments or whatever to defend ourselves in the advance of an attack. But we have to do more to protect ourselves.
So you misrepresented my point slightly, which is this. First of all...
Me, I'd never do that.
No. Point one, we are not neutral. Point two,
so
the triple lock is a sacred cow.
That's different.
But I'm saying we are not neutral. We are obliged to do everything to support our fellow 26 members in the EU state. Military neutrality, I will come on to. Now, in terms of the triple lock, this is a sacred cow of history, going back to the World War, going back to the UN. The UN has been transformed. It is actually a nonsense of a debate because it's over the narrow confine of where and they're raising the figure now. So the decision of Cabinet, the legislation, means this is to sell, you couldn't make this up to 12 soldiers, right? God love us. That's now going up to 50 soldiers. I mean, this whole peacekeeping thing is not serious business in terms of that. Now, in terms of the overall defence situation, so we've now got ourselves that we're committed to, we're going to spend 3 billion on defence. Lovely. Where this is going to be paid for, there's no money for
Apple money.
Sorry, this is every year we're going to spend 3 billion. Sorry, you actually made a valid point about spending the Apple money on security and cybersecurity, which can be a once-off thing. But what's been promised now...
Well, cybersecurity, you make initial investment, you have an awful lot of continuous investment that would actually have to be made.
I accept that. So the point is this. In terms of Ireland's defence strategy, so just... The triple lock really isn't worth bothering about in terms of debating it because it's such a no-brainer of a situation. But the question does arise, and this brings me on to what was the biggest anticlimax of the week and a complete failed opportunity, and that was the Ireland-UK summit. Talk about... Like, if I was teaching, I would be so mad with the civil servants in my own department and in the Department of Foreign Affairs that you hadn't prepped anything about North-South cooperation, be it security, health services, third-level education, training, anything about post-Brexit. We've had 3 years' experience of it now. Do we need to fine-tune some of the common travel area trading issues, the migration issues, and so on? That they actually said, well, now the only thing we can say in Liverpool at the end of the summit, as Micheál was dashing off to an EU summit, and Starmer trying to defend Europe vis-a-vis Ukraine, and he's too busy, that, well, the only thing we can say is we do love each other and we are getting on better than ever, that at least we met. Like how bad is the preparation for that? There should be what they should be doing is setting down over the next 5 years. These are the type of things, which brings me back to the security question, that there is a memorandum of understanding since 2015 that Ireland is looked at as the flapping door to the UK and Europe in terms of weak security, something that the Russians could take an interest in. So therefore there is a common interest at looking at that flapping door and develop the memorandum of understanding of how we can have a joint security arrangement for the next decade. So instead of just throwing 3 billion at the problem, let's look at our radar, let's look at our marine surveillance, let's look at the cybersecurity cables, let's look at our energy security and actually come up with a common platform that we can proceed, given that Britain isn't in the EU.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you on that. You know, funny enough, I actually reckon our underseas cables are a little bit safer than we actually think. The reason being, they all come from America into Valencia and Kerry and go on from there. But if they were to be attacked by the Russians, that would be regarded as an act of war, not against Ireland, but against America as well. So it's not going to happen. So I don't think we need to be as concerned. You can't be complacent about it, but it may not be the major pressing issue that some people actually think.
Would you agree the Liverpool summit was a complete waste of... it didn't even chart a course for the future of an agenda.
I agree. I think it was unfortunate. I think it actually would have been an awful lot bigger if it wasn't for the fact that suddenly Micheál Martin had to go off to Brussels, if it wasn't for the fact that Keir Starmer's attention in recent weeks has been diverted to looking after Ukraine. I think the intention, from what I hear on both sides, was to make it more than it actually was, but they will get back to that hopefully at some stage.
But they didn't even set out, this is what we hope to achieve over the lifetime of the two governments.
No, I think, you say we're getting on better than ever. You got to remember that relations between the two governments really hit a nadir during the Tory rule. There's a lot of ground that needs to be made back up again. I think there's obviously good intentions on the part of Keir Starmer and the man who apparently is the power behind the throne, Morgan McSweeney from Cork. So I think there will be the efforts made, but they've just literally fallen down the priority list at the moment.
So two things on a domestic level. While everyone was having absolute hysteria about Trump instead of just calm down, there was two interesting domestic political developments during the week. One is to do with the presidency and the other is to do with the speaking row in the Dáil, which I think is relevant to this episode. First of all, on the presidency, I've been rooting around here, and what I want to tell you is categorically, Bertie Ahern will not be a candidate.
That's not a surprise.
Okay, categorically.
Why are you saying categorically?
Because now we're into March, and if you're going to run, you want to be making the preparations, you want to be raising the money in your own head in terms of your family and friends and putting a team together.
Very hard to raise the money when you don't have bank accounts.
Well, that's a gratuitous, that's an outrageous, below-the-belt dig at our former Taoiseach, who has been the most successful politicians with 3 consecutive terms as Air Taoiseach.
And in fairness, I'm sure he had put bank accounts in
fact, it's not worthy of you. You're invited to withdraw that.
But that's exactly one of the reasons why he's not going to be running. Because he gets hit with things like that all the time.
Sorry, let me rephrase this. These people have decided themselves they're not standing. Yeah. So Bertie has decided he's not standing. Frances Fitzgerald has decided she's not standing.
Oh, that's interesting.
Róisín Shortall has decided she's not standing. Yes, yeah. Now, so on the presidency, Ivana Bacik wrote to the Greens and the Soc Dems and said, look, should we have a little chinwag about this? And actually, that was rebuffed. And they said, look, if we're going to have a chinwag, we should include all the left, People for Profit and Sinn Féin. That meeting took place with all those representatives in the middle of this week. And my understanding is that Sinn Féin have not made a decision. They reserve the right because they have, more than 20 Oireachtas members. They can nominate a solo candidate. But I think they're minded to continue with this left cooperation thing for the time that's in it. The two names, and I think it's only two names around which the left are congregating. One is Frances Black, who has the advantage of being very liked as a person. Yeah. Anyone I speak to, I don't know her personally, right?
I do, and
she's very likeable, and she's very. And some people say maybe she wouldn't be tough enough for the manure that's dumped on you for that. But she's
for the campaign, not in the job. The problem is actually the campaign tests you in a way which
the slurry campaign.
Completely irrelevant to your ability to do the job.
And the other person is Catherine Connolly, who did a podcast with Sean O'Rourke and put it like this: the only way I could describe it is that she's gagging for the job. Now, I'd ask the question, and that's where both women, very viable candidates. Why was it, when the hiatus was taking place after the Dáil arithmetic was known, the obvious no-brainer solution, if you didn't want to have a Fianna Fáil or a Fine Gael TD as Count Corla, the last Count Corla was Catherine Connolly. And why did everyone on both sides of the House say, no thanks? So I'm just leaving it at that there's an issue there that I just wonder how viable her candidacy is.
I think Frances Black would be a much stronger candidate.
And so the bottom line is, and she is favourite, 11-4 favourite with Boyles now, Frances Black, and 10-3 favourite with the. So there has been a lot of clarity, I think, starting to emerge on the president.
Okay,
the other issue is the Dáil route.
No. Yeah. Before you go to your other issue, sorry, I have something I want to add in this. I mean, could it be? I mean, Peter Casey has declared himself in the run against.
personal friend of mine. Yeah.
Is he? Okay, right, okay. And
what's the word you used to describe him?
I can't remember how I described him, but anyway, let's not go there. Anyway, we'll see if Peter Casey really wants
another bout of moral indignation.
Run and lose again.
In your mind. Go on. Yeah.
But could it be that it will essentially end up having a head-to-head between Michael McDowell and Francis Black? Because Michael McDowell would be...
proxy FFFG candidate?
Yeah, and there are all the rural independents behind. I think with Michael McDowell that he wouldn't get many transfers. I'd say he'd get a lot maybe of number ones, but would they be enough to get him over the line?
Is it possible that would be a class divide almost of a presidential election? I didn't know that Michael was a confirmed runner.
No, he's not a confirmed runner, but I just think you should take
He'd need to get nominations. He can go for 4 councils or 20 members of the Oireachtas. I'm not saying he is a candidate, but the question is, are Fianna Fáil going to run a candidate?
Or are Fine Gael? Are they going to put Mairead McGuinness ahead?
Or are they going to run a joint candidate? But the left, I think, are starting to get their act together.
But
the other issue is
this is going to be very interesting. Will the left manage to hold together? Because if they come behind a candidate... everyone criticises the left that, if they were to try and form a government after the next election, 4.5 years out or whatever, that, they wouldn't be able to agree. I mean, this would be a test as to whether they can agree on a candidate and whether they can all hold together and back in their candidate.
All you need to agree on is a budget, a postering campaign, a leaflet campaign, and that your organisation will do the best endeavours. Like, there's no philosophical or problem in that. The other issue is the Dáil row. Remarkably... this is talk. Remember back in the day with Cowan and the Troika, and before that, the national modus operandi was kick the can down the road.
Yeah.
So what they've decided to do is to kick this can down the road, which is toxic and which Micheál has impaled himself on a hook, and the deeper you dig, the worse it's going to be to get out of this. He is not for moving. Like, this was never about backbench opposition speaking time. So the solution they've come up with, that they rammed through the committee, they thought better of ramming it through the Dáil this week. They put it back till after all the exodus of Paddy's Day. But mark my words, this ticking time bomb ain't going nowhere, and this is ready to blow up in the government's face. So the first decision is we'll have no Dáil committees, which is no legislative scrutiny, no public account scrutiny until at least April, and then we're into Easter, and the more the government impale themselves on this hook, the worse it'll be for them.
Okay, well, let's leave it for this edition. If you want to hear more, there's a subscriber edition, and we're going to particularly be focusing on the revelations this week about the alleged crimes carried out by people on bail and how that fits in as well to the excessive prison numbers we have.
The debate on waste of public expenditure in the Dáil. And I spoke at an Irish water event, and you know the way I talk about this religious lady from Foxrock who stopped Clonliffe? You won't believe what's happening with Clonshock. Apparently, I'm going to tell you in detail, that there are swimmers in Malahide who are the main point of the judicial review objection for the entire sewerage scheme for Dublin. You couldn't make it up. It is farcical.
We'll leave the courts to decide on that. But anyway, thank you very much, everybody, for listening. To Aidan and Tom for looking after the production. And as I said, there's lots of other things we'll be getting to on the subscriber edition as well. From me, Matt Cooper.
And from me, Ivan Yates.
Thank you very much for having been with us.